So I gotta put this little disclaimer before the video starts because I've tried to upload this video twice already, which is super painful because my internet is really slow. And both times I was unable to monetize the video because YouTube's copyright system is a joke. So throughout this video, I'm gonna have to put this cat over a lot of it. So just try your best to look around him, I guess, because it's the only way I'm gonna be able to put this video up. I've tried like twice now, and unless I just cover parts of the video, I'm not going to be able to post this to YouTube, which is pretty ridiculous because there's YouTube channels that have uploaded the entirety of the movie that I'm about to talk about, and those videos have ads on them, so I just don't get it.
A few moments later.
So Highlander 2 is considered to be the worst sequel of all time. It's the second installment of the Highlander series, which consists of like 4 or 5 different titles that I didn't even know about until just now. It was all started by the first movie, Highlander, which was an 80s action movie that I called the most confusing movie of all time in my last video. That movie is pretty well liked though, and Highlander 2 definitely is not. Last video I checked the Rotten Tomatoes page of this movie to find out that they literally gave it a 0% and some of the worst reviews I've ever seen. But I'm gonna go through the rest of this video assuming that you saw the last video where I talked about Highlander 1, because some things that I explained in that video I'm not gonna be re-explaining here. So I highly recommend that you go back and watch the first part of this video before watching this one, because there's a lot of things I'm gonna be saying that won't really make any sense unless you've seen it. I was originally just gonna have part 1 and this video just both be in one large video essay, but I decided to split them up so I want to go too long without uploading something. So this video is like intended to be viewed right after you finish the first one. This is one of those movies that has a lot of backstory and history to it, and there's a lot of reasons that things in the movie are the way they are. So throughout the time that I'm explaining all of the different parts of this movie, sometimes I'm going to pause and give some backstory or some Highlander 2 lore, if you will, to explain to you why that decision was made. Also, final thing before we start talking about this movie, make sure you're in a good headspace before watching this video. Go outside, do something fun, go hang out with some friends, and then come back. I would recommend not watching this video or the movie itself in the morning time. Watch it at night because it's going to ruin your day, and I would want as little of your day ruined as possible. So maybe watch it right before you're about to go to bed. Actually, don't do that either. You'll have nightmares. But, just allocate the time properly. Make sure you're in the right headspace to watch this video, because any mental illnesses or like physical problems you have, I'm sure that watching this movie is going to amplify it by like 10 times. So the movie opens in what I'm assuming is a couple of years after the ending of the last movie. After winning the gathering, Connor McLeod has gone on to become a scientist, and him and a bunch of other scientists are working for this big company that's trying to solve the problem of the ozone layer of the earth depleting, and because of that the sun is just roasting and cooking the earth. Honestly, this is probably the last direction I expected the story to go after Highlander 1, but okay, it could be good. It's always good to try new things, go to new horizons. Maybe this will be good. Connor McLeod, the immortal Viking warrior, is now a scientist. Some other dude comes up and puts his hand on his shoulder and assures McLeod that people are going to remember this day for thousands of years to come as the day that they protected the world from the sun. So McLeod orders somebody else to press a button, and it turns this gigantic CGI satellite to point at the earth. So the satellite blasts the earth and covers the entire globe in a shield made of like mist or something that replaces the ozone layer and makes it so that the sun can't destroy the earth. All right, guys, we're maybe 30 seconds into this movie and it's already bad. But before I explain why it's bad, let's keep going for a little longer. So the satellite shoots this laser beam at the Earth that covers the entire planet in a shield that protects it from the sun, and the scientists all put on sunglasses to shield their eyes from it, I guess. Meaning that they probably blinded the entire population of planet Earth unless they all knew to put on sunglasses, not even any sunglasses, these specific kind of military-grade sunglasses at the exact same time, which is impossible because there's only 2 outcomes for this situation. It's either you coordinate every person on planet Earth to put on these military grade sunglasses at the exact same time, or coordinate all of them to like look away or like cover their eyes or something, or you didn't and you blinded every single person on Earth who doesn't have military grade protective sunglasses. And how would you have coordinated all of these people to do that? Just, I guess, have politicians say speeches all over the world to put on glasses at this specific time, and then manufacture billions of protective eyeglasses and then give them all out for free? Like, what about people that are disconnected from like society? What about like people who are like living out in the Himalayan mountains? Like, I guess they're all blinded or something. And you might try to defend this and say something like,
oh, but Zero, there's a third option, and it's that the light isn't dangerous and doesn't blind people.
And I would say no, because if it wasn't, then why did they feel the need to put the sunglasses on? They wouldn't have put them on if it wasn't dangerous to their eyes. They would have just looked at it. And what about all of the people that live on the spot that the satellite shot at? I guess they just died, like GG. It's not like they shot the satellite at Antarctica or something. Like, we can see it's not really an Arctic place that they're shooting at. It's like on some land right here next to some ocean. This is land. So the satellite shoots a laser beam of light and blinds the entire population of the planet and kills the millions of people that are residing in the blast point, and then spreads aurora borealis around the entire planet and somehow altered the atmosphere. Even though it was shot at the ground, you would think they would put the thing on the ground and then shoot up at the sky so that it would hit the sky, not hit the ground. I guess it hit the ground and then somehow impacted the atmosphere around it. I don't know. What is happening here? What's going on? How is the satellite shooting at the ground impacting the sky? I guess it shot down until a certain point and then dissipated, but what did it hit then? Oxygen? It doesn't make any sense. And why is McCloud even here? What qualifications does he have to be a scientist tasked with something so ridiculously complicated as shooting a laser beam from a satellite to cover the entire world in a protective shield from the sun? He's a Viking. What makes him qualified to do any of this? Up until this point, nothing was ever established in this movie or the last one that showed how he was smart or some type of like scholar or how he knew a lot about science or anything. Nothing. And that's not even mentioning how the last movie took place in 1986, right? This movie, or at least this scene of this movie, takes place in 1999. So this takes place 13 years after the first movie. And in the first movie, everything was fine. There wasn't a single mention about the ozone layer depleting or getting destroyed and the sun destroying the earth and like scorching it or something. Nobody said anything about that. So that means this is a new problem. So that means suddenly the sun destroyed the ozone layer of the earth within a span of only 13 years. And the thing is, if that's not the case and it was just gradually destroying it over time, don't you think like anyone would have noticed at all? Isn't there organizations that have a little job of monitoring the atmosphere? Like there's weather balloons everywhere. If this was a gradual thing that was longer than 13 years, you think somebody would have noticed it. And if it's not, then how did the sun destroy the ozone layer in 13 years? Why wasn't it the entire time? I guess decided like, well, you know, today's the day to start destroying the ozone layer. I don't know, man. I don't know. All right, so continuing past the first 30 seconds of this movie, it cuts forward in time to the future, which by coincidence happens to be 2024. That's pretty funny. In the future, McCloud is now aged into an old man, even though he's an immortal. If you forgot, basically because he won the gathering in the last movie and was the final immortal, his prize was to not be an immortal anymore and to pretty much just live as a normal person on Earth. Gee, what a prize. So he's driving around in his car in 2024 and it shows off the giant shield that's around the whole planet. But it seems like the shield has brought its own problems because it's perpetually nighttime. Like it's not daytime anymore across the entire planet, which is obviously pretty bad for hundreds of different reasons. But the movie doesn't really bring up any of the reasons that this is bad, because I think that if they did, more and more people watching the movie would realize that human life probably wouldn't be able to survive another 30 plus years without the sun. So they don't, and just instead mention how it's bad and how it sucks so bad that there's no sun and it's always nighttime because of the shield. McCloud drives into this opera house and watches this play or something, and it cuts back 500 years to another planet called Zeist. What a stupid name for a planet. So this planet is where McCloud and Captain Morgan are from. They're actually aliens. They're not immortals that have lived for hundreds of years on Earth, like the last movie literally told us how he was a Viking and stuff. It turns out that they're actually just aliens from another planet, and all that was just a lie or retconned, I guess. I don't know. It's never explained. So they get invaded by this evil warlord guy named Katana, a man that's for some reason named after a Japanese sword from Earth, even though he's an immortal and has presumably been alive for way longer than samurai or even Japanese people have probably even existed, but yet he's named after a sword that they created thousands of years after he was born. And he basically just ransacks their entire village. And then McCloud and Captain Morgan get exiled off of the planet Zeist onto Earth, where they have to compete in the gathering. And the last one left alive is either allowed to come back or stay on Earth and just like die as a person. So they're not immortal on Zeist, apparently. Like they're only immortal on Earth, because like there's a ton of people shown dead here, but I don't know. I don't know. And this also doesn't make any sense because in the last movie, McCloud met Captain Morgan for the first time there and just didn't even know who he was. Did he like forget the memory of him when he was exiled or something? I mean, they were exiled together. If they already knew each other, then why didn't McCloud act like he did? Was he just pretending to not know him? And it makes even less sense because Morgan trained him and taught him how to fight better. You're telling me he went through this entire time training him and McCloud just like didn't know who he was? But there's a reason that it's all like this. Now, as you might be able to guess from the quality of this movie, the entire production behind it was just a complete shit show in every form of the word. The studio didn't have any plans for for making a sequel to the first Highlander movie, and that's why the ending of that movie is just so tightly knit, and there doesn't really seem to be a way to continue it. McLeod just wins the gathering and just lives out a normal life and dies. Like, how are you going to take that and make a sequel out of it? You kind of can't. And it's fine because there was no plans to, until the first movie started blowing up on home video and making a ton of money. So they decided, okay, let's make a Highlander 2 and make even more money. Now, a common practice with American movies is to film them in other countries where the US dollar is worth more there. For example, Highlander 2 was actually filmed in Argentina and not in New York, where the movie takes place in. And this is because their currency is actually worth less than US dollars. Like, if you took dollars and converted it into their money called pesos, you would actually get more money than you started with. It's really weird that it works like that, but it just comes from different economies across the world working differently. So the crew for Highlander 2 went down to Argentina to film this movie, but the main problem was that right after they started filming, the entire economy for Argentina just completely collapsed. And because of that, everything experienced hyperinflation, which basically means that the prices on everything rise super high because their currency is worth less. It needed more currency to be worth the same amount that it was before. And because of that, pretty much all of the stores there withheld their products and weren't selling anything, including food and water and things like that, because they knew that everything would just keep inflating and they could just sell it for more money later. Like, why would you sell something now when you can just wait a week and just sell it for a higher price? So this made it really hard to get things for the film, like props and stuff like that. There was nowhere to buy it. And the things they were able to get were super expensive. Today, this whole event is referred to as the 1989 riots of Argentina, because this caused tons of riots where people would just run into stores and loot and raid them because they literally wouldn't sell them basic things they needed, like food and toilet paper and shit. And this was the environment that this movie had to be filmed in. So obviously it blasted past the budget that it had set for it, which was $34 million. So what happened was the bonding company of the movie stepped in. A bonding company is pretty much just insurance for movies, and it's there to protect the people who invested into it. So the bonding company stepped in, paid all of the crew who wasn't able to be paid anything because they had no money to pay them, and then slowly took over the entire production of the movie, including the final edit and everything, and basically just took all of the resources they had and tried to complete the rest of the movie in the cheapest way possible. That's why so much of the CGI in this movie looks terrible, even for the time. This movie came out in 1991, and some of this stuff looks like worse than A New Hope, which came out in the 70s. And this also explains why nothing in this movie makes sense at all, and it just basically throws away facts and canon that were established in the first movie, like McLeod being from Earth and being a Viking and just being immortal, and that's why he's lived so long, or Captain Morgan and McLeod not knowing each other until they met hundreds of years ago, and just coming up with the fact that they already knew each other from some planet called Zeist that was super far away. And to make things even worse, obviously this movie bombed in the box office and it only made 16 million back. And like I said before, the budget for it was 34 million. We don't actually know how much money they ended up spending on this movie. We just know that $34 million was the budget they had set, and we know that they blew right past that. So more than $34 million was spent on this film, and it only got 16 million back. As you can see, because of all of these rewrites and changes that the bonding company made to this movie, there's parts where it seems like the movie in itself is actually self-aware of how much it doesn't make sense.
You come from another planet, and you're mortal there, but you're immortal here until you kill all the guys from there who've come here, and then you're mortal here.
What? Bro, what are you talking about, man?
Unless you go back there, or some more guys from there come here, in which case you become immortal here, again.
Something like that.
Bro, I'm out, man. That nigga's tripping.
Back to the movie though, it cuts to a shot of McLeod, now back in the future, driving through the city when he parks his car in the middle of the road, not even in a parking spot, and walks into this bar. And then he sits down to get a drink, and some random woman that's sitting on the other side of the bar asks if he's McLeod.
Are you McLeod? Hey, I asked you a question. Are you McLeod?
Yes, I am.
So throughout a large part of the movie, McLeod talks in what I guess is an old person's voice, but he doesn't really sound like an old person. He sounds like SpongeBob when he goes to Sandy's tree dome for the first time and doesn't have any water. I feel like any second now he's about to be like, I don't need it. I don't need it. I need it. Like, who told him it was a good idea to talk like this?
Terror is a dangerous business, Miss Marcus.
I'm not a terrorist.
Well, whatever you are, you'll have to excuse me. Bye, Miss Marcus.
So it turns out that McCloud was actually the leading researcher on the whole project where they put the shield around the entire Earth to protect it from the sun. And because of that, everybody across the entire planet hates him for it, because now it's perpetually night and life sucks. And they hate him so bad that random people like this woman run up to him and try to attack him and hit him over the head with wine bottles. And it's like, dude, what was he supposed to do? Just let everybody get scorched by the sun and die? Like, what's the alternative here? It's not like that's a super complicated concept that nobody would understand. Like, yeah, this sucks, but the alternative is everyone dies. I'm pretty sure the average Joe would understand that. So as he's leaving the bar, this woman named Mrs. Marcus comes up to speak to him, and she tells him that there's a conspiracy theory that the ozone layer is actually fixed and the Earth can be protected from the sun, but that the company that McCloud works for is purposely leaving the shield up because they're profiting off of it somehow. So she wants to recruit him and a bunch of other people to go and then try to shut down the shield because it's not needed anymore, so it can be daytime again. And my question is, how is the company profiting off of a shield in the sky? Like, people aren't paying for it, it's free. Like, how are they making money from that? Doesn't make any sense. And how does she even know the ozone layer is fixed? Did she just jump up in the air and look? Like, how? So McCloud is like, no, I'm good. I don't really want to be involved with this, which makes sense because he's like a 70-year-old man. And then she says this:
I admired you. I can see that's all gone now. You're nothing but a tired old man.
Dude, what do you expect him to even do? He's like 70 years old. You want him to just run in there with machine guns and like shut the place down? Like, what were your expectations here? So he turns around to get back into his car and drive away. The car that's still parked in the center of the road, not even in a parking spot. And then she jumps in and she's like, well, I'm just gonna follow you around since you say no and just convince you to say yes. So he's like, okay, fine.
What do you want me to do?
Help me.
I can't. Not now.
So while all of this is happening, back on the planet Zeist, Katana sends these two weird birdmen that just, I guess, are supposed to be ripoffs from the twins from the Matrix Reloaded. He tells them that they have to go kill McCloud, but doesn't really give a reason why, because there isn't really a reason. He's just like, go kill McCloud, so he has something to do. So they teleport and just jump in the air and land on Earth. You'd think if they landed on Earth like this, they would hit the ground with like the force of a meteor, but I guess not. They just land down and are fine. And I guess they also just somehow know McCloud's exact position on Earth because they land not too far from his car across the street. So McCloud and Marcus get out of the car, and then he tells Marcus to hide in this garbage bin, even though they're just looking straight at them. Like, they can see that she's hiding in this garbage bin. They're right across from you, dude. I guess these bird guys have the minds of babies or something. Like, if you remove something from their vision, it just doesn't exist to them anymore. So they forget Marcus exists, and then they go straight for McCloud and start shooting at him with these weird laser guns. And they have some of the unluckiest, worst aim I've ever seen in my entire life. Like, these 1 in 1 million chance misses. Like, look at this. McCloud is running away up these stairs, and they shoot at him, and they happen to hit this tiny little piece of metal on the railing. If they aimed a little bit higher, they would have hit his chest. And if they aimed a little bit lower, they would have hit his thigh. They had to hit right on that little piece of metal so they don't hit him and the movie can continue. And then a police car shows up, so they turn and shoot the police car, and with a single bullet from their gun, it just completely explodes. Why didn't it explode when they shot McCloud? Why not? Is it two different guns? Why not shoot him with the exploding gun? So then he runs up these stairs and has a sword fight, and it's just more pool noodle sword fighting. And it begs the question why he doesn't just shoot him with his gun. I guess his laser gun that shoots light beams ran out of ammo or something. So eventually they fight and fall into this train, and the train rolls over the guy's neck, decapitating him, which means he dies, since that's the only way immortals can die is if their head gets chopped off. And then that causes McCloud to absorb his power, because whenever he kills an immortal, he absorbs their power and becomes immortal again, I think. So then he starts absorbing all this lightning energy, and it makes the entire block just explode, killing probably like a few hundred people. And then this gas truck drives directly into him and explodes. And then he walks out of the explosion completely unscathed, and he's now young again. Yay! Which, like, I guess when he absorbs the power of another immortal, it de-ages him, which begs the question of why it didn't de-age him the first time when he was killing all the other immortals in the last movie. I guess it just resets him to a set age. I don't know. Maybe he just has the age predetermined that when he kills an immortal, it resets him back to. So then he jumps on one of the bird guy's Green Goblin glider things and just automatically knows how to operate it, I guess, from his time on Zeist like 700 years ago. And he flies around and chases the other bird guy. And he flies all around the city while this super triumphant music plays. And he's just chasing around this cardboard cutout. And it's shot so terribly because it keeps cutting between McCloud and this bird guy he's chasing like 700 times. And it just actually makes me feel like I want to just throw up all over my keyboard. Let's just count how many cuts are in this scene. And that goes on, by the way, for about maybe another 2 minutes straight. It's just 2 minutes straight of these two guys chasing each other around. Or not even chasing each other. They're not chasing each other. They're flying separately, and the camera is just cutting between shots of both of them flying. And it's implied that they're chasing each other, but you never see both of them in the same shot. And I think it's because both of these actors weren't even really on the set at the same time. They probably just filmed footage of both of them flying on different days, and then had to like splice it together like this in like 500,000 quick cuts. The camera cuts so much that you can't even really tell what's happening here. You can't tell if McCloud is gaining on the bird guy or if the bird guy is getting away or anything. You can't tell anything about what's happening. The only information you get here is that both of these characters are both flying. Like, what? So they fly around some more until McCloud runs into a car and falls and climbs up this ladder in a matter of 1 second just to tap his sword on the bird guy's sword. Then he runs away and hides between these two cars and waits for the bird guy to turn around. And then the bird guy just sees a homeless man sitting by this telephone booth and just randomly shoots him and kills him for no reason at all. So then he flies around and McCloud thinks of a plan. So he runs to the other side of the alleyway, pulls up a string that happens to be on the ground, and the camera cuts like 700 more times again before he holds the rope up into the air and has the bird guy fly past it to decapitate him. And it's like, dude, the rope isn't sharp. It's just a normal rope. How would it cut him? If anything, it would just rip the rope out of your hands. So then, since he killed another immortal, it means that he's going to absorb his power. So he starts having another morb. He starts morbing again. And then a lightning strike flies up into the air, bounces off the shield, and lands in a play in another country and just spawns Captain Morgan, even though he died in the last movie. It just is never explained. Like he just respawns. And it doesn't make any sense because the lightning strike bounced off of the shield, and how did it land indoors? It's not an outdoor play, it's indoors. So how did it like land indoors? And what implications does this have? Does this mean that whenever he morbs and shoots out lightning everywhere, the lightning has the ability to respawn other people from the past if it bounces off of the shield? It's just never explained. Like, I just can't make sense of it, no matter how much I rewatch it and try to think about it. But this dude lands back down on Earth in the middle of this play in Scotland. And since he's dressed like he's from medieval times, everybody in the audience just thinks it's a part of the play, and then the other actors just try to play it off like it was all intended. Then Captain Morgan doesn't really go along with it, and what happens is this movie's miserable attempt at comedy.
What's your fucking game, shithead?
Shithead? What's a shithead?
Get off this thing!
So the idea is that this lightning bolt bounced up, hit the shield, and landed in Scotland, which begs the question, how did this lightning bolt go this far across the entire ocean? I'm not even going to try to make sense of this, but it just seems like the angle that it would have to go would have to be just like much different than the one that we saw. Then Morgan steps out of the play and almost runs right into an oncoming truck. Haha, how funny. Whoa! I guess this means that there's no sidewalks in Scotland. Like, you can just walk out of a door right into oncoming traffic. Like, it just goes right out into a road. Then we cut back to McCloud and Marcus, and McCloud explains to her that he's an immortal and can't die unless his head is chopped off. And I guess she thinks this is really cool because she just kisses him and they start making out, even though they literally just met like, I don't know, 15 minutes ago. Then we cut back to Katana, who is still on Zeist, and he's like, alright, well, I sent the two bird guys and McCloud killed them, so I guess I'll just go and try to kill McCloud myself. And he doesn't really know why he wants to kill McCloud. He just wants to kill him because why not, I guess. So he jumps from Zeist and lands in New York and falls through the ground through a subway train into the cab. And the force from him jumping from another planet through space and landing on the Earth through a fucking subway train isn't enough force to cause it to tip over and like crash or something. So he works his way to the front of the train and then kills the operator and then just starts driving the train himself. Dude, where did you learn how to drive a train? Were there like train operation courses on Zeist 700 years ago? Were you wearing the same blue cloak during them as you are now? Because you've been wearing the same outfit for 700 fucking years. And these aren't what train controls look like. And then he turns the speedometer all the way up to hundreds of miles an hour and making it so fast to the point that there's actually sparks as he's flying through the subway. And he gets all the way up to like, what is it, like 400, 500 miles per hour, and then drives through this wall, which I thought subways were underground. And also, I thought you were going like 500 miles per hour. How do you drive at like 500 miles per hour and then hit a wall and come to a fucking standstill? All right, so I just need a second to breathe real quick. Let's just kind of take in everything that we've seen in this movie so far and just kind of recuperate for a second. So I consider this series of unfortunate events the first fight scene of this movie. So let's kind of just compare it to the first fight scene of the last Highlander movie and kind of figure out which one we think is worse. The thing is, with the parking lot fight in the first Highlander movie, at least that was a fight. Like, at least there were two people and they were trying to hurt each other. Right? Like, at least it had the fundamentals of like what a fight is by definition. This doesn't even have that. This is just a series of events that are just happening. Like, it's just not even it's just not even a fight. On top of that, I think the first Highlander movie, as shit as that movie was, looked a lot better than this movie. And I don't mean like the CGI or anything like that or the effects. I mean like literally the way it looks. This entire movie just looks terrible. Everything is like old and brown and dark, and like I get that it's nighttime, but it was nighttime in the fight scene in the first movie in Highlander 1, and that didn't look like this. I guess the point is that there's supposed to be a lot of pollution and it's just gross, and it's supposed to like show how the world has fallen from like 30 years without the sun. But it's like, dude, you could have like shown that in a much better way. You don't have to just make everything like old and gross and just disgusting to look at for a viewer, from like a viewer's perspective. It just looks so bad. At least the parking lot fight in Highlander 1 actually had a reason to even happen, right? Like, there could only be one immortal, so all the other immortals are trying to kill each other so that there can only be one left. But here, there's just no reason for this fight to happen at all. Katana sends these two bird guys to go and kill McLeod, but he doesn't even need to. Isn't McLeod like old as shit? If you just wait like 10-20 years, won't he just die from old age anyway? That's not really a long time to someone who's an immortal and has been alive for thousands of years anyway. It's probably just like a couple years for them. Why not just wait a couple years for him to die of old age and save your time? Because I'm sure they know that even though McLeod is really old, he still has somewhat of an ability to fight back, as shown where he was able to defeat the Birdmen. But it's just ridiculous. It makes no sense. This dude is supposed to be the general of an army. How does he just not even realize this? He's just wasted his time. So then Katana decides that he doesn't have any more troops to send down to kill this guy. So he's just like, all right, I'll do it myself. So he jumps down through the subway train and then he says this.
This sure doesn't look like Kansas, does it?
He says that it doesn't look like Kansas, which is a reference to The Wizard of Oz. But like, how do you know what that is? And how do you even know what Kansas is? You're from another planet. I guess maybe these people are like knowledgeable about Earth or something, and it's not really explained that they are. I guess that's maybe why they decide to send the immortals to Earth specifically, because it's inhabited by other beings that look like them, and because of that they've learned about their like literature and stuff like that. I wish the movie would explain that so I didn't have to like try to theorize myself. Another thing that doesn't make sense is that when McLeod kills both of the Birdmen, he like morbs and becomes younger, which like I'll explain how that doesn't make sense. But what makes even less sense is the fact that Captain Morgan gets revived. Why doesn't like the other immortals get revived, like the Kurgan and like all of the other ones? And if immortals get revived whenever you kill one and absorb their power and morb, then what's the point of killing them? Because whenever you kill one, the others would just revive and then there would be no way to be the only one. Like, what the fuck? I just had to make sense of this. I had to figure out how this is even possible, so I did a little bit of research on Reddit because Reddit knows everything. In the many backstories during the making, one reason they're immortal on Earth was because a day on Zeist is equal to a century on Earth. This allows for jokes that if it's 500 years ago on Zeist, no wonder they came from the dawn of time. Haha, oh boy. I like to pretend it was a typo. It was 5 days ago on Zeist. So McCloud and Captain Morgan were sent to the Earth 5 days ago in Zeist time. But for some reason, the time moves faster on Earth than it does on Zeist because time itself changes in speed depending on the location you go to. Alright, that makes sense. I'm not even making fun of this guy's comment. I'm making fun of the movie because he's correct. Anyways, this allows for an easy reason why they look the ages they do. They age when they reached their maturity when they were sent here. Apparently, there was a scene written in which Katana watched them being born on Earth, and I do mean born. Kurgan was supposed to have a cameo being sent to Earth by General Katana to assassinate McCloud and Ramirez. Clancy Brown, having been done dirty by the producers and Highlander, took a look at the script they sent and refused. By the way, I don't think I mentioned this. The guy who played the Kurgan in the last movie didn't even get paid, and they just, even after the movie was done and they started working on the sequel to it, still refused to pay him. This same guy, who is a champ by the way, left another comment trying to talk about the time discrepancies between Zeist and Earth. He says, it's impossible for me to know what they did come up with while making the movie, but I did ask in a sci-fi group what people thought would make it so one place takes 1 day of time versus the other place taking about a century. Unfortunately, unless somebody who plotted the movie says, oh yeah, that's what we were doing, we'll never know if that was the idea. Let's say Zeist is close to a black hole, so time is moving very slowly for them, but we have techno magic. Now the 1 day for a century would be more of a rule of thumb, kind of the same reason we have leap years. It isn't exact, and it isn't always going to be just the same. This could explain why Katana is so uneasy about McCloud, even though he knows the man is going to pass away of old age any day now. As far as they're concerned, it's been 500 years for McCloud. But for Katana, it's only been days. In my opinion, if anything, this just makes Katana seem even more impatient than he did before. If it's only been 5 days for him, it's been 1 work week since you sent this guy to Earth to be in the gathering, and you're just so impatient you have to go kill him when he's like 70 years old and is about to die in like 20 years anyway. The worst possible thing to do would be to send immortals there for him to fight, because then there would be a chance for him to win and then get his immortality back and revive other immortals that you would then also have to kill. This is the only movie I've seen where when you get an explanation for what's actually happening in this movie, it just gives you more questions that are harder to answer than the questions that you got before. Here's one thing I want to point out. Absolutely nothing in Highlander 2 contradicts or canceled out anything that happened in Highlander. They are sent to Earth, haha, ignorant and stripped of any memory. Some subtle subliminal conditioning prevents them fighting on holy ground. Some subtle subliminal conditioning has the Kurgan after McCloud and Ramirez. It just feels good to not be alone here. It feels good knowing that there's other human beings out there who are trying to make sense of this movie and just actually make it make just logical, feasible sense. It's not just me. There's an army out there. They're going wild right now on the Highlander subreddit, trying to put the pieces together and make things work. Now, back to this movie, McCloud is at some type of cemetery or morgue, mourning the loss of his wife from the last movie. When Katana is done driving his train at like 500 miles per hour and comes into the morgue, kisses this statue for some reason and comes up to McCloud. Now, like I mentioned earlier when I was reading that Reddit post, all of the immortals and other people from Zeist have some type of custom where they never fight on holy ground. So because of this, Katana doesn't fight McCloud, which begs the question, why even come here? Because now all you've done is just let McCloud know that you're here, and now his defenses are raised. Why not just surprise attack him later? Why did you have to come here and announce your presence? You had nothing really important to tell him that he didn't already know. Then he does that classic disappear into the walking crowd trick, but here it's just done terribly. The reason it's so bad is because usually when you see this done in a movie, it has to be done in a way where it's believable. Because looking at it, it's like you know how it works. Obviously the guy turned to walk into the crowd at the perfect moment, so he just looks like he disappeared inside of it. You can see right here in this example from John Wick 3, you can see Wick slightly turn as the guy walks past him and kind of just understand how it was done. Even though this was obviously done in editing with camera cuts, you still have to make it seem like it was doable by the character in the movie. Here, it's not like that at all. This woman just walks past him and then he's just gone. Like, okay. So now we cut back to Captain Morgan walking around Scotland in the present day, and he seems to be taking this very well from someone who's been alive hundreds and hundreds of years ago, just being transported into the future with technology and stuff. You'd think he would like have a mental breakdown or something, or at least get lost, but somehow he manages to find his way to a suit store, or what do they call that, a tailor or something, I think, and he walks in and asks for a suit, but they tell him that it's going to take multiple days for them to create. So he takes an earring out of his pocket pocket and hands it to him. And I guess this one earring is so valuable that the entire staff puts down everything they're doing and makes the suit for him as fast as possible. Does Scotland work on like the bartering system or something? Like, don't you need to bring money into a store for them to do things for you? Since when can you go into a store with an earring or like gold or silver or something and then they'll do things for you? So he gets his suit made in probably the worst montage I've ever seen in a movie, and then gets on a plane. Somehow he knows what a plane is and flies across the shield in some of the worst CGI I've ever seen, even for the time. I guess he got on this plane using his passport that he got 500 years ago when he lived in Scotland. I'm surprised it hasn't expired by now. And then he's just sitting on the plane, and the plane plays one of those like safety videos that they show you like in case the plane crashes, like what you're supposed to do. But this is a hilarious moment in the movie because the safety video is super unrealistic and over the top. And look, the people are screaming and it's super dangerous. Haha, it's so funny. This movie fucking sucks. So Katana is now looking for McCloud again since he wants to kill him, but this doesn't make any sense because he was just at the church where he was at. But even though you can't fight on holy ground, why couldn't you just wait for McCloud to leave and then kill him? You're telling me that he let him go and now is looking for him again? So he takes a ride in this taxi. He somehow knows what a taxi is, but doesn't know that the windows roll down. So he punches a hole through the window to look through it, even though the window is clear and you don't even have to roll it down to see through it anyway. So then he walks around the car and destroys it until he gets to the driver's side window and punches through it to be able to see the guy, even though the window was clear. And even though he could have just talked to him from inside of the car without doing any of this. I feel like the tone of this movie changed within the last 5 minutes. Like, wasn't this the beginning of the movie? A super serious action movie in like a post-apocalyptic world with no sun, where our hero is like some old hopeless man, and it was like all serious and like everybody hated McCloud, and then there was this woman that was like saw some good in him still and that he wasn't just some washed up old man, and it was like this super serious story. And now the movie is like a joke. Like, did the first team of people who are working on this movie just die, and then the second team came in and took, oh wait, the bonding company. That's why the tone of the movie suddenly changed. This has to be when the bonding company took over the movie and they changed it to a lighthearted comedy. It's just my theory, and it probably isn't true, but it's just the tonal shift is so drastic. Within like 5 minutes, the movie turns from some post-apocalyptic existential crisis story about the conservation of the human race from the sun, and now it's just like some lighthearted, funny action movie for kids. Either that or the first team of people working on this movie actually did die and then just got replaced by another team. So inside of this building is a business meeting for the company that runs the shield that's covering the earth. So Katana goes all the way to the skyscraper and then goes up into this meeting and crashes it basically. And I guess he just beat up everyone along the way that tried to stop him from going to this meeting. So that kind of makes sense. But what doesn't make sense is, I get that it's nighttime, but like, you guys can't turn a light on in here. Like, it's so dark. How are you supposed to read the paperwork on the table? It's like nearly pitch black. These guys are making billions of dollars off of this shield from like thin air because there's like no paying customers, and they can't use like $10 of that to buy a lamp so they can see. So Katana walks into this meeting and straight to the owner, who's Chuck from Are We Done Yet? He's really moved up in the world. So then Chuck has this other guy pull out a gun and then start shooting him, and then he seemingly dies before he stands back up because he can't die because he's an immortal. So you would think that since this guy was armed with a gun, all of the other guys are most likely armed with a gun. So you would think that once this guy stood back up, the rest of them would just shoot him. But I guess not. Only this one guy had a gun, and he only had what, like 5 shots in the magazine, because nobody else shoots him again once he stands back up. And he sits next to Chuck, who asks him what he even wants, and he responds with this.
Partners. I believe you cannot run a business without partners. This is a business, isn't it?
Oh, yes, it is. We like to think of it as a good business. What exactly is it that you want? Partner?
The Highlander.
Right.
So my question is, what happened at this church earlier? Because he was just at the church where McCloud was at. He disappears earlier with the disappear into the crowd walking past him trick, and then I guess he just teleported somewhere and then put both of his hands over his eyes and like turned around and then started like wiggling his hips like this as he let McCloud get away to the other side of the city, and then went to his job to ask where he is instead of just like follow him out of the church or wait for him to leave and then kill him. You know, a much better method for this would have been to just wait for him to go to sleep back when he's like 70 years old and then just sneak into his house and just fucking slit his throat. Like, why not just do that? Why'd I have to make this so much more complicated? So cut back to McCloud and Marcus. They're just hanging out in his house, I guess, and then they get some intruder or somebody who broke into the house. So McCloud gets up to go check it out, and you're supposed to think that it's Katana, but it turns out it's actually Captain Morgan. This guy who was alive like 500 years ago in Scotland managed to get to an airport, get on a plane, and fly all the way over to New York City, and then navigate through New York City to this guy's address. Like, how does he know? Is he like a bird or something where like birds just magically know where to migrate without having never been there before? Does he just have like some goose migration powers where he can just like magically just know where McCloud is and know everything he has to do to be able to get to him? Imagine somebody from 500, 600 plus years ago living in Scotland, arriving in New York City in the 1990s. It would be so complicated and so foreign to them that they would probably just fall to their knees and have a mental breakdown. Like, think about it. They don't even know what a car is. How is it even possible for someone like that to navigate through the entire city alone? In the time that they would walk from the airport to the building where the person they're trying to visit lives, they'd have probably walked past and seen more people than they'd have ever seen in the entire rest of their life. Not even mentioning that New York City would be so much more complicated than any town or city they've ever been to. We're talking about the 1400s here. This is back when knights and samurai existed, and back when women dressed like this. I just can't even understand how this is possible. Any food that we have would probably just be too much for their bodies to digest. Like, it would have too many different ingredients in it that they'd have never eaten before, and it would just shock their bodies. Anything that they touch would have germs that their body is completely foreign to and just have no immunity to at all. It would probably just die. So he sneaks into his house, and then they play pool noodles with their swords. Fun fact, all of the swords used in this movie are actual ones. They're not props. That's why the fight choreography is so bad. On the first day of filming this movie, Christopher Lambert, the guy who plays McCloud, actually cut his hand really bad because the producers of the movie insisted that they use real swords instead of fake ones, even though the audience can't tell anyway. So because these swords are real and they're super heavy, it's really hard to do actual good choreography with like 20-pound swords. So that's why all the fighting moves they use are always super basic and they just play pool noodles. Why not just have them use plastic swords like any other movie? So they get done playing pool noodles and Marcus comes back out, and Captain Morgan kisses her hand. Like, dude, how are you letting this happen, McCloud? Isn't this your girlfriend? Like, say something. So Captain Morgan looks out of the window and notices the shield and then looks at McCloud and he's like, McCloud, you know what? We have to turn this thing off. So then they decide they're going to turn off the shield. So they go to the headquarters of the skyscraper because I guess that's where all of the controls are to turn the shield off. And they drive up to this security clearance thing, I guess. And somehow it recognizes McCloud even though he's not super old anymore. They still know who he is somehow. So then they drive in front of a green wall to get into this headquarters, and they talk about having a plan. So it turns out what their plan is to just drive their car straight through into the inside of this military base where the shield is being set up, and then just get exploded by bullets. So they just get literally obliterated by dozens and dozens of bullets. And they do this so that they can be taken to a morgue and then not die. So it turns out that Marcus was in the trunk, which this was a terrible idea. They just like put her in the trunk. You know, like bullets can go through metal. We can see that it can right here on this door. I guess we're really lucky that nobody shot at the trunk. So just to reiterate, their whole plan to infiltrate this base is to get shot and seemingly die so that they get transported into a laboratory inside of the base. Which it's like, how do you know that they're gonna bring you into this base? Like, you're betting on a lot here. Like, who's to say they're not just gonna just throw your bodies outside or like into a river somewhere and then you're really fucked. On top of that, it really makes makes you wonder how the immortality thing even actually works. As far as I know, the power of immortality doesn't really come with a healing factor. That's just something completely separate. If you get shot in the knee, then you're not going to be able to walk on that leg anymore, for a while at least. Immortality doesn't just make you immune to all damage and give you regenerative properties, it just makes it so that there's this magical force around you that just prevents you from dying to anything. So the plan works, and they make their way further into this base until they get to this death trap where they're in this room and this fan is slowly lowering further and further down, and then this happens. So this propeller fan thing starts falling down, and Captain Morgan uses some of his magic powers, I guess, to hold it up. And then after it's being held up without his hands even touching it because of the magic for like 10 seconds straight, he doesn't use this time to try to dive out of the room through the open door. He just stands there and accepts his fate. Like, what? After this, we cut back to Katana in the top of the tower, just doing the dumbest plan ever to try to kill McCloud. And I guess he's just done dealing with Chuck, so he picks him up and throws him out of this window. But it's funny because you can tell it's just a dummy that they dressed up to look like him. As Chuck is falling out of the window to the ground, he's just completely limp. You'd think he would just be like flailing his arms like windmills and like moving his legs. But no, he just goes limp. I guess he passed out while he was falling in the air. After all this time, McCloud finally makes it all the way up to the top of this skyscraper to shut off the shield, and it turns out that it's being powered by this light beam. This light beam is being shot down to the ground by the satellite in the air, and then somehow this is powering the shield that's in the sky. I'm not even going to try to make sense of this at all. I'm not even going to try to. So McCloud attacks Katana's sword a couple of times, and it's really ironic that Katana isn't even using a katana, he's just using a normal sword. But he attacks his sword a bunch of times, and they play pool noodles until he beats him, and then he morbs again because he killed another immortal, and every time he kills an immortal, he has to morb. So then he decides to turn off the shield now, and it turns out that there's no controls or button or off switch to turn this thing off. So what he does is he just walks into the fucking beam, and it makes everything explode, and it makes the beam of light explode, and it explodes in reverse. Even though it's being shot down from the satellite, it explodes up to the satellite and blows it up, and then turns off the shield everywhere on Earth. Somehow this doesn't hurt him at all, even though earlier in the fight he pushed Katana's hand into the beam and it hurt him. Somehow McCloud is just completely fine, and he smiles at Marcus one last time and the movie ends. Well, I mean, wow. It was definitely worse than the first Highlander movie, I'll say that. I think this is the first time I've reviewed a movie and haven't had a single good thing to say about it. Like, I don't have a single compliment to give this movie. Anything that could be bad about this movie is terrible. Every possible thing, the story, the acting, the setting, like the fighting, everything that could have been bad was bad here. I don't understand how this was even made. Why wasn't this canceled or like delayed? Or this is just a tragedy. This is depressing. This is a depressing movie. I really feel like I watched two movies in one. Like the beginning of the movie, like I described earlier, is like a lot more serious, and then the second half of the movie is a lot more lighthearted, and it just really makes it confusing of like, how am I supposed to take this movie? Am I supposed to take it seriously or like as a joke, or I don't know. It's just very confusing. I think this movie is definitely one of, if not the worst movie ever made. This is the lowest rated movie on Rotten Tomatoes. It has a 0%, and now I think I can actually see why. After watching the first Highlander movie, I didn't know how much worse it can get, but now I know. But wait, what's this? I thought it was the worst movie ever made until Highlander, The Source came out, and I saw it on late night sci-fi. I love the original, the other sequels in the series. You know, if I'm completely honest, The Source might be the worst movie of all time. I really can't think of a worse one. It's definitely the worst Highlander film I don't think it quite qualifies as the worst film of all time. There are some terrible, terrible films. We only hate this one so much because of the context. Wait, what? Highlander, the source? Is the source really that bad? So I went on a binge. Highlander 1, 2, 3, the series, Endgame, and now I am left with the source. It makes Highlander 2 look like a masterpiece. There's no way it could be that bad, is there? Yes. No, I refuse to believe it. There can't be a worse Highlander movie than Highlander 2. I gotta look up the Rotten Tomatoes for this movie right now. Oh my god! They didn't even give it a rating! Oh my god! Oh no! Oh no! They didn't even give it a rating. I thought I was done here. I thought that was it. So they gave Highlander 2 a 0, and this one just doesn't even. It just doesn't even warrant a rating from them. Oh my god!
Feel that speed.
Dude, what?
It's the source.
Dude, I feel like my computer is like glitching, dude. Why did they film it like that? What is this, dude? Bro, what?
The source. Intoxicating, isn't it?
Alright. Yeah, I've seen enough. Alright. Okay. I thought it couldn't get any worse than Highlander 2. I really did. I really thought that was it. But I don't know if I'll make a video on this. I think I will someday. But like, I need a break from Highlander. Not anytime soon. Someday though. I don't know, man. I don't think I've ever seen a movie in my entire life that was so bad that Rotten Tomatoes just decided it wasn't even worth their time giving it a rating. Like, it's not like they didn't watch it. Like, there's reviews from like critics under the movie. Like, they've watched it, but they just didn't even give it a rating just to like show how bad it is. I don't know. I guess this is the real lowest rated movie on Rotten Tomatoes, not Highlander 2. Below a 0, it just goes to like where they don't even think it's worth a rating from them. That's just sad to me. Oh my god. The more I think about it and the more I watch clips from Highlander the source, the more I want to make a video on it, but I'm just done with Highlander for a bit. Maybe I'll check it out in a couple weeks or like a couple months. I'm just so Highlandered out. I made the last Highlander video and then made this one right after it because I just wanted to get this whole series done and just have it all contained in like 1 or 2 videos. But it's been like an hour now. Let's get this over with. Let's rank this on the tier list. So this is the bad movies tier list. So far we have 4 movies: Morbius, The Suicide Squad 2016, Replicas, and the first Highlander movie. And honestly, I'm just going to be giving Highlander its own tier underneath the first movie because I feel like this is worse than Skull tier. This is below that. So that's what I'm going to be doing. I feel like it would be a disrespect for the other movies if I put it on Skull tier. It has to have its own tier. It has to just be like quarantined by itself. It's just, this is the craziest rabbit hole to go down. Just these terrible, awful action movies. And it's like they just keep getting worse and worse. It's like, how do they continue making these? Highlander the Source is the 5th movie. And supposedly the 3rd and 4th ones aren't that bad, but they also said the first Highlander one wasn't that bad, and it was. At least to me, in my opinion, before I get bombed in the comment section. To me, in my opinion, it was a bad movie. So those could be terrible as well. We really like don't know what's out there. It's just all uncharted territories. But I don't know. I'm sure that in a couple weeks or maybe like a couple months, I'll take a look at the Highlander series and we'll talk about the newer movies that came out like in the 2000s. Lastly, I want to thank you guys so much for watching through this whole video and also waiting for it to come out. I know this took a really long time, and it's because I've just been super busy with like, you know, real life stuff. It's just been a lot, but I've been trying to just like make time to work on these videos still because I just love making them so much. And it just makes me so happy that people watch these and will like leave comments and like tell me stuff that I didn't even know about the movie. And it's just really nice. And yeah, I think that's pretty much everything. Oh yeah, memberships are back up as well. You don't really get any perks yet. I gotta still like figure out how to get everything to work. But I guess if you want to support the channel more than subscribing, you can go ahead and like join the channel and become a member. I'm gonna put the different like channel members thing above, like at the top of the channel, so like you'll be able to see yourself and other people will be able to see you on the channel. Not your whole name, but like just your picture. Can't really think of anything else I want to plug really. So yeah, that's about it, I think. So I'll see you guys soon.